Now that the histories of pro wrestling territories are being written, the benefit of hindsight enables us to see that one territory, one that existed for barely a decade, has had a major and lasting influence on the sport 30 years after its demise. The talent it discovered and fostered would go on to become some of the sport's biggest attractions. The episodic television, which garnered bigger ratings than any promotions in the country, is still highly prized by video collectors. The large geographic area with few major population centers would set attendance records that still stand after 3 decades. It was wrestling's version of the Wild West, where every night the gunslingers, good and bad, shot it out under the direction of a cowboy who was the only sheriff in town. That territory was Mid-South Wrestling. Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting edition of a little program we like to call Back to the Territories. We're going to fire up the DeLorean, we're going to get it up to the prescribed 88 miles an hour, and we are going to talk about another one of the great wrestling territories. In this case, a territory that this man sitting right next to me was instrumental in from the beginning until the end. Mid-South Wrestling and my guest, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Jimbo, thank you very much for being here. My God, look at the size of these hands. We're going to talk about Mid-South Wrestling, its flavor, the things that made it tick, and of course the most important personality that was instrumental in the whole thing, Cowboy Bill Watts. Your impressions of him and the territory and the flavor of Mid-South Wrestling, which is still so prized and so well thought of today, not only by the wrestling fans but also by the wrestlers that it influenced. I tried to come up with some words, help me out: legitimacy, credibility, logical, believability, pro sports presentation, violent, but not violent for violence sake, violent as a result of the drama and the heat and the competition. That had to be right up your alley coming from a football background.
Well, thank you, Jim. First, it's great to be here with you, and go back and remember the territory days, which was kind of the golden age in professional wrestling. But Mid-South was probably my 4th or 5th territory that I came into. And of course, I came in as a heel because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And in wrestling, they say, it's always better to learn as a heel than a babyface. And so I came in and they put me with Ted DiBiase, Matt Bourne, and we became the Rat Pack. So it was a big time in my career and a very big learning curve for me to come in and work with Teddy.
You started in Mid-South Wrestling in 1979, and actually Mid-South Wrestling had just begun in 1978, even though Watts had been
Excuse me, Jimmy. I broke in Texas with Von Erich in 79.
Okay.
It was a little while before I actually made the rounds to get to
Gotcha.
Mid-South.
But Watts had started Mid-South Wrestling in the states of Louisiana and Mississippi when he broke off from Leroy McGurk. That was his home territory, based out of Oklahoma. And he had been a booker and part owner, but sometimes as these things happen, like it happened between Jerry Jarrett and Nick Goulas, the old guy was stuck in his ways, wanted his crew. The new guy was more aggressive, had different thoughts, different ideas, hungrier. And he took the Louisiana and Mississippi end, which traditionally had not been the big money part of the territory, but he saw something in it. By the late 1970s, Cowboy Bill Watts had become a major force in wrestling. He had spent the 60s as a main event star from New York to San Francisco. He had become a partner in his home promotion based in Oklahoma and run by the legendary Leroy McGurk. He had served as booker in Atlanta and Florida and as the protege of the great Eddie Graham. Business was good, but differences with McGurk saw Watts split their territory, taking Louisiana and Mississippi. These 2 states would start a dynasty. When you first got there, being a green guy, only been to a few territories, what was the difference that you saw immediately in wrestling in Louisiana and Mississippi than the other places that you'd been?
Well, it was a very snug territory, very stiff territory. In other words, you lay it in pretty good. You just try not to hit in the X-ring. Everything else was pretty live, And that was a change, because I was still learning the profession. I had just recently became Hacksaw Jim Duggan. When I first started wrestling, I was Big Jim, short hair, clean shaven. I wore a long gold bathrobe. And I went from there to the Convict, where I wrestled with a mask on. And I put little C's on my mask for the Convict.
And luckily, art did not imitate life, or life did not imitate art.
Thank goodness, one of the few guys in the business.